Yeah, you already know top of the top, and it won't stop. You dig? So I've stumbled upon a conversation piece at least within the social community about DJs playing old stuff too much. Now, listen, this is an argument I've heard for years. Because I'm gonna tell you, sometimes, I've been victim of it. I fall into a bag. You know what I'm saying? So I've had to catch myself where I'm playing like some funk. I love funk. Everybody that's rock with me know I love funk. So I'm gonna play funk all night if you leave it up to me. Okay. However, when I started branching out and playing other, doing the club scene, like the big clubs in LA, it was a different mentality, but I used to take that backyard boogie mentality because I did that first, before I did anything, and started bringing it to the club circuit. So I was the only dude. I'm gonna give you a prime example. It was an awkward moment, but it was a teaching moment for myself at the same time, as well as the audience. You put me at a spot like Stock Exchange, and I played at Stock Exchange downtown, like before the remodeling and all that. So I was the dude that would open up with like Roy Ayers and Bohannon, but this was early in the night, just to kind of feel a vibe or whatever. Because that's where my head was at, not knowing, like, you need to start off with some Montel Jordan, some some Tyrese, those were the cats at the time, and some Next. But I was so deep in my soul bag, that's where I was at. And nobody came up and complained, but however, I didn't read the room. Not to say that they weren't with it, but I was so engrossed in playing what I wanted to play that I didn't pay attention to the room. And at that time I was pretty, I ain't playing, at that time we ain't playing no jiggy stuff, whoa. So I had to change my attitude in terms of how I looked at those songs, because they got burnt out on the radio so much. What you like? A whole lot of. It's like, oh, here we go again. Because I'm a hip hop dude too, so I knew I couldn't go in there, playing. Here's the thing, that party was funny because I actually opened up for Pete Rock that night. And I was, Pete, it was one of those things where, because the opening set was like different from the prime time set. So the resident DJ got so drunk that he basically, wasn't able to, finish out before Pete came on. So the promoters are like looking at me like, okay, you got this, don't mess it up. And we almost got into a fight that night because I'm an a-hole when I need to be, right? Because I just never liked that dude, just, at the time, because he felt like, he was that dude. I'm like, homie, you ain't even from my city at that. It's like, you're playing boo-boo, man. I could do because that was always my thing. I was always like the agitator. And it was like, yo, you're not nicer than me, and I can prove it. That's why they have me here. So it turned into one of those things, so, but I had to respect the fact that was his house. And I was just the opener. But, the tables turned that night, because he was too drunk to finish his set. So who do they call? What Boots say, who do you call? So came up and did my thing. I mixed Don't Look Any Further with 112 Only You, the remix. I thought I told you that we were, that version, because there's the original with the I Get Lifted sample, if I remember correctly. So it wasn't that version. It was the Don't Look Any Further. So I'm blending. I'm saying the Don't Look Any Further going into that was the record. And this was about maybe 11:30, 11:40ish or whatever. And at that time, you could, the 90s was special because this was around about 97 or 96, somewhere around there. So at that time, you could get away with a lot more in terms of just playing authentic hip hop and R&B in the same night. You know, along with quote unquote jiggy hip hop. Like we'd opened up with records like what's that Mos Def joint? Man. But anyhow, we'd open up with that. You know, of course, you know, Miss Fat Booty as years went by. But anyhow, fast forward, I opened up with Dennis Edwards and Don't Look Any Further, and then I blended into 112, and then I think something else after that. So I felt somebody tapping my shoulder. I looked over. I said, I'm thinking somebody trying to get my attention to play another song. I look over, and it's Pete Rock. Wow. So fast forward, you know, he's like, no, you going in. Like, he's like, yeah. So, you know, we got cool just like right there. You know what I mean? Like, so, cause he had, you know, his, shout out to my man, Mong. I don't know where you at, you know, Mong, but wherever you at, man, like salute, you know, because, it was Mong that tapped me on the shoulder. He worked at Loud at the time, and, he was running with Pete. So Mong's like, yo, I think, you know, it's like, I think he's ready to get on. So I didn't know he was playing because it was a record release party. But fast forward, and plus, no one told me that he was going to be a special guest DJ. I thought he would just do a walkthrough, and typically a walkthrough is basically you just walk through the club or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Shake a few hands and, you know, that kind of thing. I didn't know he was ready to get down. So I'm like, oh, so I'm in full form no matter who's around, you know? So Pete's like, yo, man, you're killing it. He gets on, man, he opens up with how about some hardcore MOP, floor packed. Now, bear in mind, this is a Friday night, so all the radio hits are on, but Pete's going in, you know, because at that time, it was like corporate radio was kind of, you know, like coming in or whatever, but the playlist changed dramatically as the later years, you know, in terms of radio. You had a little bit more freedom in terms of like 95, 96 as far as like playlists on the radio. But fast forward, here we are in 2025, right? So I say that to say you have to have balance between new and old. You can't go in playing old school, because I rolled up and heard cats. I think I made a post about this during that dude playing the Christmas party. He, you know, my man going in next, y'all. Doom. I like, here we go again. 92.3 again. Oh, 92.3 the beat. Here we go. He stuck on it. You know, and I'm like, hey, homie, like, we got too many new hits you could play, especially on a holiday. You got to step your game up. So for me, you got to pay attention to your audience. Now, if you have, and the thing about it is, we as DJs, we got to pay attention to our crowd. So if we got a crowd that's like, look, we want, we want Kendrick, we want whoever that's like hot. Because here's the thing, I don't sit and wait on the radio to tell me what's hot on the street, because the radio ain't the streets, and that's always been the general rule. Whatever's popping in the streets, that's what I'm playing on that turntable. That's what's coming off in them speakers. Because when radio gets to things, it's kind of watered down. It's like, but now people, there's a whole different crowd that's like, man, like, we want to hear what's on the radio. And our whole thing was like, look, we want to break records. Because I think the original argument in terms of the conversation piece was about breaking records. And you got to realize is like, people are breaking records every day online in terms of certain songs going viral. When a song goes viral, you're breaking a record. And they don't even have, I'm going to give you a point and an example. Boots on the Ground. Boots on the Ground is not getting any radio play, but it's the hottest record in the country. Okay? So it's going back to that underground. You know what I'm saying? Like the record is so hot, it don't need radio. So those were the records I always loved, because it was like the people decided that it was going to be hot. But back to the subject at hand, in terms of balance as a DJ, you got to read your audience and make sure you're giving them what they want, but balance it out. You know, because I seen a few dudes online. Like, first of all, some of y'all dudes that be commenting, you know, talking about, I don't want to hear no old stuff. Y'all ain't spending no money at the bar anyway. I could just tell by your whole style. You got no style. You dig? So one thing for certain is that, and two things for sure, is that them classics will always take out any of this new stuff. I'll tell you why. Those records were done with intention. And not only that, you had great producers, great engineers. You had a whole different mindset in terms of how those songs were recorded. And they were recorded on analog. And I tell people, that's why soul parties will never die. That's why they're so popular. All those songs that you love, All I Do, Billie Jean, Prince, all that, those were analog recorded. Those weren't digital songs. So that's why they have a longer shelf life. A lot of the quote unquote new songs that are hot, with an exception of a few songs, they are recorded on a digital file. They are not recorded on tape. So when those songs that are still that we love the most, those songs were recorded on tape. So the analog experience is going to have a different effect. Those records are warm. It's great production. So great engineers. Those songs are going to jump at you, personally. And not only that, you had great masters, guys mastering those records. You had guys like Bernie Grutman, what's my man's name? Oh, there's so many. Herb Powers, you know what I'm saying? They were doing all the classics, so I'm just saying, now you really don't have that. Some dude will get a file, jack up, all the highs, and put it out on whatever digital format, but they'll get a little motion, but it's not professionally done. The classics that we love are professionally done, okay? And they were treated that way. That's why they still exist today. They were great songs, but we also have to keep in mind, you got to put that balance out there. Going back to that whole thing of what I was mentioning earlier with Don't Look Any Further, Dennis Edwards, and 112 Only You. At that time, that record was very popular, but that Don't Look Any Further, and I think that was before, if I remember correctly, I want to say that was during the same time as Hit 'Em Up or before Hit 'Em Up, if I'm not mistaken. But anyhow, because when you play that record, everybody's like, hit 'em up, hit 'em up. I hate that record, but that record is corny. But anyhow, with that record has such a cultural feel. Nobody's going to sit down when that record comes on. That song has what I like to call cultural currency. You heard it here first before anybody bite my, you know what I'm saying? Cultural currency. The classics have cultural currency. It has meaning, so the new songs have to get to that point. Like Kendrick, they not like us. That has cultural currency, okay? It has a significance. So when people, I understand the younger audience, coming, because they want to hear the songs that they like. So you as a DJ have to decide what type of crowd you're going to play for, okay? I would say for the classics to stick to more of a grown and sexy kind of party, your boots and jeans party, your professionals, and then, mix it in some of the new stuff. Don't get it twisted. They, people our age, 40 and up, or 35 and up for that matter, we want to hear a lot of the new stuff too. But at the same token, we came to hear the heaters. And, those new artists, those old school artists, quote unquote, I hate that phrase, old school artists, but the, cats, that artists that are still relevant today, they're releasing new music. So I think a lot of the DJs need to concentrate on the new music and breaking those records. Don't wait for the radio to play. Be the one to break it at the club. And, you know, because it's always been a rule, radio always followed us. And it's always going to be that way. I don't care what anybody says. Like, the club and the underground always dictated what goes on the radio. Because you got some people now, oh, you know, I want to hear what's on the radio. And I used to tell people, like, look, if you want to hear what's on the radio, you need to go listen to your radio. You know what I'm saying? But, you know, in all fairness, it is a business, you know, so you got to give the people what they want, like the OJ said. So keep in mind in terms of balance, you know, get that new school in there, but don't be afraid to break new songs either. That's the importance in terms of just creating balance, but also get into your bag, you know, of the classics, but don't stay on the classics all night. Now, if the crowd is feeling it, the floor has the final say. You know what I mean? But don't try to force. I don't want to go there hearing, I get around like, oh, here we go again. You know what I'm saying? Like certain records, like, okay, look, I think this is a good time for me to say this here. I have officially retired Frankie Beverly and Maze, may he rest, Before I Let Go. I can't play that record no more. I'll tell you why. That record has been worn to the ground, okay? And it'll always have cultural currency for various reasons, but that record was always personal for me. That record is like me first starting second grade at the time and hearing it on the radio, and it's just different, you know, family functions, things of that nature. It's like now it's been so co-opted. It's like, oh no, it doesn't feel like ours anymore. You know what I mean when I say it. It doesn't feel like the real heads. It doesn't feel like it belonged to us anymore. You know, it's worn. Let's let it rest. Frankie Beverly has way more records than Before I Let Go. Running Away, Southern Girl, Joy and Pain. What's another good one? Back in Stride. I can go on and on, but y'all stuck on that. And really, Before I Let Go is a sort of like almost like a line. It leads way into the line dance sets. I get it. It'll always have a significance in the black community, you know. So, but for me personally, I gotta let that record rest. I gotta retire it, you know. But it'll always hold cultural currency. I think that's one of those records that will always have staying power, no matter where you're at in the world. But I can't play it no more. I'm gonna play his other records, you know. So, you know, Time Is On My Side is another great record. That's actually my favorite Frankie Beverly record. Time Is On My Side. That was the first time I think that song and Working Together were the first two songs I remember by Frankie Beverly coming up, growing up. Then everything else came in after that. But anyhow, enough of that. Check me out on SoundCloud, soundcloud.com/unique74. I got mixes up and so forth. DJASkey.com. Talk to y'all in a minute.